Good afternoon to everyone that's joining. We'll start up in a few minutes. We just want to give everybody a chance to get into Zoom and get all of their technology working. We are so glad you are here today.
So while we're getting some final technical things set up, I wanted to bring out our symposium that we're hosting at Region 10 at the Abrams location, first weekend in October. I don't know what football games there are that day, but this is more important. So we have 4 speakers set up. We have a youth panel that's going to talk about a program that's adaptive theater. It's an incredible program. We're going to have some topics about University of North Texas post-secondary opportunities for students with disabilities. To have a topic on how to access Texas Workforce Commission VR services. That's a very, very important services if you have a child with a disability. That's their agency for the rest of their life. We're going to have a topic on SSI, the most confusing program that we have to become experts at to understand those 1,000 pages of documents that even the people that work there that have trouble with. We'll have somebody to tell you where to go to get help, and we'll have some vendors that also help with that. We're going to have our closing session is going to be a retired teacher who, instead of going off on the set, she is volunteering her efforts to support the disability community, and she's going to have a presentation on how to access community programs out there. We got to get our kiddos off the couch, get that iPad and the YouTube out of the way, and got to participate. We got to have those social opportunities to grow and make mistakes and get better from and feel better about ourselves and everything. So it's very exciting. I want to thank Sarah and Amy for helping make that a reality and a hopefully an exciting event.
We are so excited about that. And I did put the link to that flyer in the chat for everyone. And we'll share that again at the end of today's webinar as well, because we would love to have you join us. It is a free event, and we will also be providing lunch for anyone that is there that day. So we would love to meet you in person. Okay, Jim, I think we are about ready to start with our actual presentation today. This is our September webinar. Region 10 ESC and Partners Resource Network are again so glad you're joining us today. Our topic today is ARD Meetings 101 and a guide to the ARD process in Texas. And our own Jim Wright from Partners Resource Network is going to be presenting for us. So I am going to go ahead and turn things over to him. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to say a quick shout out to Angel. She's joining us for this one to see how it goes. She's going to be doing the Spanish presentation at 1 o'clock. And so she's so excited and nervous, but she's going to do great. So I want to welcome her and thank her for joining us. And Partners Resource Network is a agency that's a nonprofit. We're supported by the Department of Education through a grant. We serve as Texas's PTI, Parent Training Information Center, and we collaborate with the TEA to help bring programs together. And we teach parents how to advocate for their kids, to know what the resources are out there to help their children with disabilities. One thing I think is very interesting about the law, how it was written, is that we have to have staff members and our board have children with disabilities. So we have walked in your shoes. We understand the challenges and the joys of parenting with special education children. And I have a 22-year-old has Down syndrome. He's legally blind. And I have a 19-year-old that had severe dyslexia. He spoke Martian until he was about 5, and he got speech therapy. So they were both served in special education. And I'm proud to say that they are a success story of the special education process. And, with the support from Partners Resource Network to help us to navigate, to learn how to advocate for them, and through this, asking questions and participating in the school, welcoming that interaction, that they were able to get their needs met, and they're off into little adulthoods, and we'll see how that goes. So hopefully we did a good foundation, and I'm pretty confident we did. Today we're going to talk about a guide to the ARD process in Texas. That is a pretty dry subject, but it's a very, very important subject to understand how we come up with these plans to provide the right supports and the right structures to help our children, reach their potential and to achieve success. So when they're at any point of their life, depends, it could be when they're 3, 2, it could be when they're, in high school. If they are really, really struggling, you have to figure out how to get help for the school age student. The first thing you want to do is you want to talk to your child's teacher and the school principal. That is your first line of communication. And you want to, share your concerns, get the feedback from that. And then at that point, you'll start to evolve into understanding all of the um, possible supports that exist for them. And then upon doing this step, you'll have something called the Notice of Procedural Safeguards. They have to be provided at least once a year upon the initial request for evaluation, anytime there's a complaint from a parent in the school year, anytime there's a due process hearing, anytime there's a disciplinary change of placement or a parental request. Typically, these are given to you via email, electronic format, and you can find them yourselves housed on the SpedTex website. Uh, Sarah at the end will talk a little bit more about SpedTex and the resources they provide. So it's very important that when we have any type of disagreements, we not sure of how to go about that, that you utilize this resource. Also, we did a webinar that is posted on Region 10's website that you'll get access to, that we talked, about every component of this procedural safeguard. That was our last month's topic. And so it's a great resource if you have any concerns or questions to go there. I do want to share another resource very quickly. I'm not going to go into it in depth at this point, but with this webinar, you're going to get a copy of this presentation. You're also going to get some handouts. One of the handouts is called Legal References, and it's going to tie into the handout. It's going to tell you where in the law you can find about what we're talking about. And I think it's very important to know that, these are not just things that we're coming up with. They're in the law, and we created actions and programs to support what the law says. The next one is a study guide. It's going to be a little bit, this one is going to be about all the acronyms that we have. There's about Heck, there's 7 pages. So there's a lot of acronyms that, that we have in the special education space, and all of our teachers and administrators, they don't say admission review and dismissal what the ARD is, because we call it the ARD committee. And in Texas, we call it the admission review and dismissal. The rest of the country, we call them IEP meetings, individual education plans. So all of these, if you want to know the language of special education, here's your cheat sheet guide to it, and you can become an expert and fluent in special ed ease. It's a can be confusing and complicated. Um, we're also going to have what we call the study guide, and here I just want to point out, to get services, you has to be one of these specific disabilities to get special ed services served under admission review and dismissal. So we'll go back to the presentation. So we get to our referral for our full individual initial evaluation, what we call an FIIE. And then after the first evaluation, they're called FIEs. Refer back to that handout. Totally confusing, lots to learn, but we're going to have you have that information so you become an expert, not only your child, but on the process. So when we refer a child, it can be initiated by parent, the school, any other person involved in education or care of your student. It could be a therapist. It can be a neighbor. We can help get that process started. It does need to have parental consent. They can't do it without you. You have to provide consent, and you have to be a part of that process. And we want to conduct that evaluation in all areas of suspected disability. And I'm going to encourage you that everything, when your child is struggling, it needs to be in writing. So when I have parents call me, I tell them you need to create a diary, a journal, a spreadsheet all about your child. And you need to have time and dates on there because it's going to be a complicated roadmap until you to the point where you feel like all of your child's needs are being met. And it allows you not to have to store all this information on 34 different emails on two different email accounts, that type of thing. We need to create a master sheet and have concise information so we can help advocate for our child. And I found this to be the most effective way to communicate and to prepare yourself for any type of meetings and interactions with school personnel, medical professional, any type of therapies. So then we get to a legal notice called prior written notice. And this is the most confusing legal term in special education to me. I've been a coordinator for 8 years. My child's 22 years old, so he had a legally blind, so he started at 6 weeks old. I don't know why they came up with this word. I'm sure it has to do with Latin, which I was obviously not very good at. But prior written notice is when the school proposes or refuses to initiate or change the identification, the evaluation, the educational program, educational placement, or any provision that provides free appropriate public education, FAPE. FAPE is the most important tenet of the law. So anytime that you have a request or they're going to make a change, they're going to have a prior written notice of why they did it or why they did not do it. And this prior written notice is going to be at the end of the ARD paperwork. Most schools now use software packages, and this tends to be the section right before we sign the agreement or disagreement of the ARD paperwork. So that's where the prior written notice is in. It's embedded in the software, so it usually is there. How well defined and the words put into it, that can vary. But if you have differences of opinions, this is a very important part of it to help get those differences resolved. Again, you are part of the process. You are a major part of the art committee. The school may have 6, 8, in my case, my child had significant disabilities, so we had like 12, 13 people in that room. And it was myself, my wife, and then oftentimes I would bring my father or his grandfather to be there. And everything has to be done with your consent. So you are a part of the process, you're involved in the process, you're part of the committee, you're part of the team, and it does involve your consent, especially in the initial evaluation and the initial provision of services. They cannot move forward until you give your consent. Also, it needs to be informed in your native language in form of communication and sped text on the website. If you have to have a different translation version, they have at least 16, up to maybe 20 different languages that they have translated the procedural safeguards into. So it's an incredible resource that we need to be aware of and utilize if you're a non-native English speaker. So in this time, we're going to move forward. So eligibility for special education services. So how do we know that, we need to get services? You have to have a disability. Going back to that first page I showed, it had to be one of those 13. And as a result of the disability, you must also have a need for special education services to benefit from education. So it has to be a disability and an educational need. So just having one doesn't mean you have to have the other. And so once we have those, then there can be two different types of services. We have something called a 504, which is a disability law that you can't be a discrimination law, or you have services under an ARD review dismissal IEP setting, and that's what we call special education services. I would like to start a campaign that we change it to IDA services because it is the IDA law, and this is actually the 50th year anniversary of that law. So we're going to have some celebrations throughout the year, and I just wanted to point it out that this is something that's happened over time and it's evolved to where we really have these supports to help this community. So art committees means they have to be held at least once a year, and the purpose is to review the student's IEP, determine where we are on the annual goals. Are we making progress? Are we having goals met? Are we have lack of progress and the reasons for those? Um, we have a reevaluation that has to happen at least minimum 3 years, more often if a significant changes happen. Any new information about the student provided to or by the parents, anticipated needs of the students, special factors, or any other matters. And once your kid is aware of their disability, they have that ability to understand that they're getting services. I strongly encourage you to have them participate in all or at least part of the meeting because they need to be able to articulate, what their needs are, what their wants are, and what their dreams are. And that's basically what we're kind of going over in these meetings is how do we help them meet their needs? What are their strengths? And what are their dreams? What are their transition goals? That's what I call dreams. So the more that they can participate, the more that they can have their voice, the more they're going to be able to advocate for themselves for their adulthood. Because if no matter what disability, whether it's, a visual, a transparent or invisible disability, they're going to have to advocate for themselves to get their rights. And the earlier they learn to do that, the better capacity they're going to have as they go into their adulthood. So who has to come to these meetings? You have to, number one, have to have parents. You have to have at least one regular education teacher, at least one special education teacher. One individual can interpret evaluation results. Typically, that's called a diagnostician, but not in all districts. Sometimes that can be an administrative person at the school or administration person at the district. An individual who represents the district. It can be somebody like a assistant principal, or somebody from the school, or it can be at the district level, and the student when appropriate. Um, in my son's case, he was legally blind, so we could not have a meeting unless we had the individual who was his case manager for his visual impairment. And the same thing applies if you have an auditorial impairment. So if you have one of those disabilities, if that person is not at that meeting cannot proceed. I learned this because they were late one time, and that's how I learned that they have to be there. This is before Zoom, so they can just pop in like that, like the magic we've had in the last few years. So how do we schedule our meeting? The parents need to be invited to each art committee meeting. They have to be prior written notice 5 school days before the meeting and to arrange a meeting time and place agreeable to the parent and the school. And sometimes there's some conflict here of that. If you're not able to make the initial meeting proposed, you need to communicate that, make sure you have it copied on more than one person. And I strongly suggest that you give alternative dates that you can meet. Give 3 or 4 examples of times that you are available. That way you are showing that you are participating in the process. You're not just trying to be in denial and you're trying to, slow things down or like that, that you are actively participating and you have a desire to make sure that your child is representative and that again communicate that in writing so that's very clear that you are wanting to participate. What are the responsibilities of the different art committees? When we develop the IEP, they must consider the strengths of the student. It's super, super important. It's because we have to make our strengths stronger because that's what's going to be their employability. That's what's going to make them to get through life. You have to address their parent concerns. We have to look at the results of the most recent evaluation, make sure that their developmental is being appropriate. And here's another key acronym, PLAF, the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. You really want to look at those to make sure when you read that, yes, that is describing my child where they are right now. Because if you transfer from one school district to another school district, or you transfer out of state because we have different jobs, the only way that that next group can get those services started and initiated is they read this paperwork. So this paperwork needs to reflect the levels of the child, the services they're doing, so they're saying, oh, in the classroom, we're doing this. It needs to be in this document because that is an accommodation. We need to make sure everything that they're doing is documented here. And on the flip side, we don't want to have check marks of every single accommodation that is listed on the page just because we want to cover everything. We want to have those accommodations to reflect the needs of the child because, again, they should be receiving all those levels of services. So sometimes, in trying to protect the child, we're interfering with their ability to grow. So it's a fine line of getting that the right level of support, too much support, not enough support. And so I call that, kind of the art of helping the child. And that involves communication, data, documentation, and, working together with your school and your child to figure out what those needs are. So what are the responsibilities of the art committee? So when we develop an IEP, the art committee must develop measurable goals designed to meet the student's needs. And so goals is an art. It's science, it's backed by science, kind of like medicine. Medicine is backed by science, but it's also an art. And so it takes experience and it takes knowledge of the disability, the individual student to start developing those goals. There's a fine line between too few goals and too many goals. And sometimes as parents, we want to have 27 goals because they have all these needs and everything like that. But sometimes if we have too many goals, that interferes with their gaining skills. So we're not all about goals, we're about skills. And goals are to help show that we are making progress to those skills. So if we only have two goals, either the need's not very great or we might need to dig into that. So there is definitely a fine line of too much. And also we want to use SMART principles. That will be in another presentation, but look up that word SMART. We want to make sure they're measurable, that we can understand that those goals are appropriate and that type of thing. So we need to determine the accommodations for participation in the mandatory state assessments. So these are accommodations for STAR testing, which is about to change. These are also accommodations for SATs, College Board, those type of things. So we need to make sure that those accommodations are appropriate and being utilized, because you have to have those two criteria to get them to be accepted by the College Board. We need to identify supplementary aids and services, related services, and special education services. And I can go on and on and on about those things for my older son, because he had a lot of needs. He had, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy. He had adaptive PE when he was younger. He had music therapy. He had vision therapy. Um, again, he had significant needs, but all those supports is making him successful as an adult. And I truly believe that. He was in a play. He was King Triton in The Little Mermaid a month ago. And so he goes around, I'm king of the fish. And that would not have been possible without all of the teachers, all of the structures, the law, the special education system to allow him to live a dream that he did not know he had. And so for him to participate in society, to have a meaningful life, it all goes back to that. So what are the responsibilities of the ARD committee? When we develop an IEP, we have to decide whether a student qualifies for a student school year, ESY services. Typically, this is designed for children that have high needs. They call low incidence disabilities, which is a fancy word of saying they typically have an intellectual disability. And not only that, but they have to take a extended period of time to recoup the skills that they had the previous year. My son did qualify, and it was very interesting that when he did get the extended school year, he recouped it. But so the next year, he did not qualify because he recouped his skills. And so then we'd go a year without the summer services, and then he would be behind again. And so after a couple of times of doing this, I said, look, we have the data. If he gets the extended school year, he recoups. If he does not, he regresses. And so we have the data that supports that. And so that's a need. And so we were able to come to a meeting of the heads of that, and we agreed. And he got those services until he was later in high school. And so it's a very specific criteria, and it's not just summer school. It's a designed to recoup goals. We'll make sure that we make decisions regarding transition goals. In the state of Texas, we start those at age 14. And they're even going back that we're going to have transition into from early childhood to elementary school to middle school to high school. So there are transition phases of all those. but by law, they have to start formally doing those, identifying those at age 14 in Texas. Federal law says age 16. So Texas is more progressive in transition, and Texas is also more progressive in autism services. So we want to guarantee that the student will be educated in the least restrictive environment, LERE. So the two biggest concepts in this presentation, LRE, FAPE, least restrictive environment, free appropriate public education. You need to know those acronyms, what they mean, how they're defined in the law. Go back to those handouts I have, read up on that. You need to become very knowledgeable about that because that's how education plans are designed. And then decide, what type of graduation criteria that's going to be. From what I understand, that is evolving throughout the state, and we're going to have some different guidelines for students with significant disabilities versus not, and so that's going to be evolving to be announced probably this coming year or perhaps next year. Discipline. I get lots of calls on discipline. The student code of conduct applies to all students, even if they have a disability. So special rules and limitations may apply, but they have to be documented and they have to be as a direct result of their disability. So anytime we change our student's placement, or we're going to change the student from their current placement for more than 10 collective school days during the school year, otherwise known as OSS, out of school suspension, ISS, in school suspension, or DAP, disciplinary alternative education placement. Again, those we cover in the procedural safeguards. So if we're on this, you need to be looking at your procedural safeguards, looking at that video, and you need to be contacting us or sped techs. So when you get to this point, you need to reach out for help. Because in the process, the next step, if your child is charged with something violating the school code of conduct, we're going to have something called a manifestation, determination, and conduct, MDR. When we do a review, when we do our MDR, we're going to have the school administration and the parents, and we're going to discuss the actions, what triggers, what led up to it, what behavior plans are in place, that type of thing. There are laws about that have to follow, and then we determine, was this as a direct result of their disability, and they made this action because of their disability? Then if the case is yes, then we will not go proceed with further discipline, and we'll go back to the placement, and we'll come up with more supports and plans, and maybe adjust behavior plans to meet the needs of the student. This is the step before we go to a interim alternative education setting, or DAEP, which is more commonly called in this area. And again, it gets very detailed. I encourage you strongly, before your child gets into trouble, download the code of conduct, whether your child has ADHD, autism, behavioral issues, intellectual disability, pretty much any disability. Read the code of conduct from page 1 to page 30, whatever it is, because they need to know what the rules are. And if they violate what these rules are, the teachers and the administrators are doing what they're supposed to do because these rules are broken. So if they have friends that encourage them to violate these rules, at least the student has an opportunity to make a choice. Because if they did not know that it was wrong to bring beer to school because they had no concept that alcohol is against the code of conduct because it was never read to them, whose fault is that? Still the child's fault. They get to pay the penalty. But us as adults and parents, we need to educate our children so they have the opportunity to make these mistakes. Sometimes they'll still make mistakes. We call this learning opportunities. It's better to make those mistakes before they're 18, but give them the opportunity. It's tedious. It's not exciting, but it's necessary. So we have a discipline issue, then we have a dispute resolution, we have a facilitated IAP, mediation, complaint, due process hearing. Those are again in that last video that we had last month. We have the whole hour on this, pretty much this slide. If this is something that you are concerned about or involved with, go look at that video. Sarah did an excellent job in going through that. Great information. SpedTex has it, great information on this, as well as Partners Resource Network, our website, and contact your regional coordinator. If you happen to be watching this from a different region, get us involved so we can help you not be overwhelmed with this. So we go to our ARD meetings. Just kind of recap what we're going to do. We're going to have our introductions. We're going to have our notice of procedural safeguards. We're going to review our assessment data. We determine eligibility. Now, if this eligible is the first time or the first meeting after the first time, that will spend more time. If this is the sixth, seventh, eighth year of that, typically that goes pretty quick. They're going to review our present levels, our PLAF. Then we're going to review the development of the IP. What are our goals? What are our accommodations? What are our related services? We're going to figure out where our placement is. Please note that placement does not mean school. If they have a different placement, if they're in a self-contained kind of placement, whether it be a behavior classroom, life skills classroom, functional academics classroom, SLC classroom, that may or may not be at their home campus, or maybe at a different campus. So we determine what program first, then we figure out the school. And if it's in their home school, then typically that goes there. But if it is not, when you go to a different school, that's a different process. So placement and location are two different concepts. We're going to go through our assurance and reading the minutes, our closing remarks, and signatures. So the final thing I want to leave to you is I strongly encourage you to ask for the draft copies of the IEP at least 5 school days prior to the meeting. And when I did this, I said, 20 days before I can meet at this time, I need this information in 5 days in advance. If you can't get this to me 5 days in advance, I'm more than happy to reschedule this ARD meeting, at a mutually convenient times to allow you the opportunity to get this information so I can review it and be prepared for this meeting. The other thing is the signatures. If they're a 90s, I would say, a lot of times we say 80-20 rule. I say in special education, I say it's 95-5. And 95% of the time, we can just sign that. We're good. We have good communication. We have a plan. We've pre-met. We've had good discussions. We're total agreement. We sign it and go on. If you're in that 5%, and you're probably calling us at that point, take the opportunity to really read it, make sure that the changes are there, make sure you understand it, and you have some time to review that. Um, right now, it's a lot of software, so you may have to get an email to you, print it out, whatever it is. But you do not have to write agree or disagree. They may have to sign that you attended the meeting, but you can do your agree or disagree at a later time. So make sure that the whole point of all this is make sure that our kids' needs are being met. That's the whole point of all this for both sides. So that is going to wrap up our session. 4 minutes over. I'm so sorry, but I think we started a little bit late, so maybe we're good. Some additional resources. We have our website, Partners Resource Network, prntexas.org. And this is our contact information. And then I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to have Sarah come in there. She's waiting to talk. She knows I just won't ever give up the mic.
Thank you
And
again
I'll
to
stop sharing.
everybody for being here today. Today's webinar was recorded, and so we will post a link on the Region 10 website about 7 to 10 business days. Also, following today's meeting, we are going to email all of the participants a link to the materials that we shared during the meeting today, as well as a link to where the recording will be posted. So we are now going to launch a poll to get some feedback from you. And while you are filling out that poll, I'm going to talk again about a couple of upcoming events that we have. I know we talked about building bridges and the Connecting the Dots Expo at the beginning of today's presentation. Really quickly, before we share that again, we also are hosting a statewide webinar that is tomorrow at 12:15. We are going to have Kristen McGuire, who is the Deputy Interim Commissioner of Special Populations, very long title, at TEA. She is going to be with us tomorrow, and she is going to be talking about some of the legislative updates that have happened during this last regular legislative session. Lots of important things. And so this is a great webinar to attend. Again, it is being recorded if you need to catch it later. But I did want to put the link to that flyer in our chat as well. And then back to what we were talking about at the beginning, Our Building Bridges with Connecting the Dots Expo is happening here at the Region 10 Education Service Center, Abrams Building on October 4th. I am going to share that information again. And then our next free family webinar for Region 10 will take place on October 21st. And our topic for that event is going to be about SpedTex resources. So I know Jim talked a little bit about SpedTex earlier. SpedTex is the Special Education Information Center for the state of Texas. We are funded by the Texas Education Agency. We're housed here at Region 10, but we serve the entire state as a free resource for families. We do have our call center that is staffed during business hours, but in addition, we have a website with a lot of great information. And so during that October webinar, we're just going to be going through that website a little bit. I'm going to show you some of the resources that are there and how you can access those. So I want to thank everyone again for being here today. We'll leave that poll going for just a couple more minutes, and I hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Yeah, I'll be attending that webinar tomorrow as a parent or as a professional and parent. Sarah's going to be a talking head on that, so you'll get to see her glam shot again tomorrow, because she's a bigwig and everything. I'm just a little guest speaker here. So I encourage you to go see that, because there's been a lot of changes and the updates, and I think that the cell phones is a big one. So and discipline is a big one. So you need to get that information to be informed, to work with your school to help your child, and get that great information that TA and Partners Resource Network are collaborating on to bring to you. And information is power. It totally is. And thanks for filling out the poll. That helps us keep our grant to keep our services free, which I forgot to mention at the beginning. And have a great day.